I'm Dr. Barry, licensed psychologist, and here I share legal and entertainment news from a psychological perspective. Today, we are going to be talking about a very difficult case. It is Collin Griffith. And Court TV did I think it was a really great series, and it has the term psychopath in it. Like, is he showing signs of psychopathic traits or not? I've also received some comments, and it had me go back and watch certain parts of the trial. In particular, I watched his grandmother's testimony, and then also I heard portions of the ring camera on the day of the incident, and you can hear Colin's mom. Um, Talking with him, and I just wanna give some tips. So, for anyone that's new here, anytime I talk about a case, I always wanna take a look at what we can learn from the situation or what we can take from it, all right? So, let's go way back. So, I believe Colin was living with his father, and let me pull up my notes for this. Um, he was living in his father in to Lincoln County, and, it was out in Oklahoma, and when he was 15 years old, this was February of 2023, I wanna say. I don't have the exact date in front of me, but, Colin says that he shot and unalived his father in self-defense, and that case was closed, and he moved to live with his mother. And a lot about his mother's mental health has come into this case because after living with his mother for less than a year and having the police called out to the home multiple times, and he had a few psychiatric holds while he was with his mother, and his his grandmother, his mom's mother, testified for Colin, talking about some of mom's difficulties. He is trying to claim self-defense again, but it doesn't seem like it's like a legal, like, it seems like it's just they're vilifying the victim to say almost like she provoked him and it was her fault. That seems to be the defense to me. Please correct me in the chat if you disagree. To me, I see a lot of problematic traits. I also think his environment was um, difficult for his type of personality. And because it sounds like his dad, based on reports that I've heard, it sounds like there was a pretty toxic relationship with his dad, and there might have been a history of something in the past. And then with his mom was very emotionally reactive. Now, emotional reactivity, in my opinion, is not justification for the capital M. It's just not. And if Colin is found not guilty, I would be concerned about his relationships with a partner, his roommate, his because it sounds like when he gets upset and agitated that he has the ability to unalive people and not feel bad about it. Now, sometimes, because there are people that make a career or life, they are special forces military, and because of their mission, they go to certain countries and they do secret missions. That is what we might consider a pro-social expression of some of those types of traits. In my personal opinion, in this case, he hated his mother, and that is the prosecution's theory. He had talked about thoughts and wanting to unalive her. He had mentioned to his grandmother wanting to go into foster care. It does sound like he was asking for some help, but his mom was his legal guardian, and it was gonna be difficult unless somebody challenged saying that she wasn't fit to be his parent. Um, and the bar for that is pretty high. Um, but I just wonder if at any point she ever felt that she was in danger for that her own life, especially knowing that he had unalived his father less than a year before. All right. I have an overview of the case down in the description. Let me just give a few other details from the trial. Um, the according to the Oklahoma Bureau of Investigation, at his father's incident, there were never any formal charges against him, and, saying that evidence showed a legitimate case of self-defense, and a pew-pew was used with the dad. It was a knife with his mother, and it's a pretty long knife because so trigger warning for some graphic details, the knife went all the way through her neck, and they had expert testimony to that described that there are like, that's a whole lot of force to not just, do this to somebody, but for it to go through all the muscles, to go through the entire neck. Um, uh so I have been busy. I'm behind on some case notes, and TRICARE is they changed their processing system, and I haven't been paid for any claims in January. And so like I've been working through some stuff with TRICARE, so I haven't been able to watch every moment of this trial. They are saying that yes, there were some messages from the mom, um, threatening to expose what happened with the dad. Because I wonder if he admitted to his mom that it wasn't self-defense, or if he said something like, "I'll do to you what I did to dad." I could see an individual like him saying something like that. Um, Let me continue. Um, so the sheriff, Polk County Sheriff Grady Judd, said that when he looked at Collin that he sees a psychopath, and that was during a press conference following his arrest. The sheriff described Collin as violent, dangerous, and that he showed zero remorse. And I do believe the lack of empathy or lack of remorse or lack of grief about his mother being deceased was discussed during the trial. The trial was streamed on Court TV, Law and Crime, and Recovery Addict. Also, I know there were a few videos because I saw his video covering Verdict Watch today. The jury started deliberating today around a little after 11 a.m., and they went home about 4:40 p.m. today, and the jury is coming back tomorrow to continue their deliberations. The defense and prosecution both gave their closing statements today. All right. Oh, all right. And so, the incident happened at his grandmother's home in Auburn, Auburndale, Florida. Yeah. All right. About an hour southwest of Orlando. When deputies arrived, they met him outside and described him as calm, cool, and collected. He was not upset, and he had blood on him, and he used similar language in describing what happened with his mom as that he used in what happened with his dad. And he said in the 911 call that his mom fell on the knife and died, and that's mm, if I was on the jury, I would definitely have some question marks about that. And I think everybody investigating, that just didn't seem realistic. I am glad that they made sure that he didn't have access to a pew pew, to a more lethal weapon. That's all right. All right. And so there was evidence that they got into an argument that became physical. And with a child that's showing these types of traits, the parent should not put their hands on the child. And if the situation is starting to escalate, they may need to involve law enforcement or some trusted person. They might need another person there for safety if things do escalate. I haven't heard. So I heard that him getting evaluated. I have not heard a diagnosis in this case. I have also not heard of any like medication or anything like that. They described the mother as having thoughts of wanting to unalive herself and her having some emotional issues in the past. And the prosecution said that she was not a perfect mom, and and I'm sure there were mistakes made, but it didn't rise to the level of her deserving death. Like that's just really, yeah. All right. Um, the investigation also showed that Griffin's father Ah, had a knife and okay, so this and chased his son into a bedroom. Ooh, if that's how that happened, then that really could have been self-defense. Sorry. All right. So, for his father's death in 2023, evidence showed that the two got into an argument and it became physical. The father had a knife and chased his son into a room, backing him into a corner where a loaded rifle was located. That's silly. Okay. And, Griffith, used the rifle on his father, and, no formal charges were made in that case. And okay, um, and there was some monitoring. It sounds like there was some probation. There was law enforcement that was involved with his case and that was monitoring him. The way that they described her injuries was just, ugh. And, if I was the therapist for this case, and if I knew that there had been a parent that had died in the past, I would have had an honest conversation with the mother, especially with the level of contempt and hatred that he seemed to have for her and his ongoing homicidal thoughts towards her. We would have had a real conversation about safety and if she struggled with managing her reactivity because uh that can definitely escalate situations. And for a child that lacks empathy or that struggles to see things from somebody else's perspective, one of the worst things you can do is be overly emotional, which is easier said than done because I'm sure it was frustrating. It sounds like he didn't respond to limits, boundaries. It sounds like he wanted it his way. He wanted control. It sounds like he was easily agitated, but that agitation came out as like homicidal thoughts. And so, um, yeah. And he did tell his grandfather that he was going to unalive his mother. And Jenny, I agree with you. You don't just fall on a neck. So the grandmother, let's watch a little bit of her testimony. We're not going to watch all of it, but we're just going to watch a portion because I had some thoughts. So let me just get my screen together. Present. All right. Let's just share a little bit of her testimony. It seemed like she was reading off of something during her testimony, and her testimony came across, I don't know, like her testimony seemed very prepared. I struggled a little with her testimony. I just did. And but they talked about the fact that the mom's mother, so this is the maternal grandmother, it seems like was a history of conflict, estrangement between Kathy and her mother. And so it was just very, very and yeah. Let's just go ahead and play this. This is the defense asking, the victim's mother, so Collin's grandmother, questions. And Collin has glasses on, like dark glasses. We see the lawyer in front. Collin is on the other side of the lawyer.
Mr. Willantis on the stand mentioned that Kathy got Collin a second phone and that must have been what Collin used to talk with Mr. Willantis on the phone every week or every other week. Tell the jury what you know about a second phone.
The second phone, I purchased the second phone when Collin came to live with me in the January, February time period, the first time she threw him out. And I couldn't leave.
Okay, so I guess there were times that the mother, um, things probably escalated to the point where it sounds like Colin would go and stay with his grandmother at times.
A kid in the double wide by himself without a phone. Plus, since I didn't live.
Hold on. Why didn't Collin have a phone with him when he went to live with you in January of 2024?
Because Collin and I were at the Mexican restaurant in Port Charlotte. Kathy and Collin and I were supposed to go. When I got there, Kathy said, "No, I don't want to go." And I said, "Come on, at least have some nachos or something." "No, I don't want to go." And I said, "Can I take Collin with me?" "Sure." So while we were at the Mexican restaurant, she called me and she said, "Don't bring Collin back. I never want to see you or Collin again."
And the phone that Collin.
Right. Um, and so that's where with cases like these, if a child is showing antisocial conduct disorder, psychopathic like traits, you need to involve the entire family. You really need family therapy, intensive family work. And wow, let's keep this going.
Had at that point, where was it?
It was at Kathy's house.
Okay, so you brought Collin to
the double wide in Arvindale, and I didn't even have internet because, of course, I wasn't there all the time. So if I needed to, I'd hotspot my computer. I didn't want an extra expense for internet or cable or any of that. And so I realized I couldn't leave Collin here without a phone. So I told him, I said, "We're going to have to go to AT&T and get a phone for you." And I even got a 786 area code because that's the area code that I have in the keys.
And that second phone, did Collin have possession of it from January of 2024 all the way up until September of 2024?
No. He only had possession of it for that small amount of time from when he came to, which would have been, it was either the end of January, the beginning of February. He had possession of it there. And then when he left, he took it, and I immediately got it. I got weekend.
Okay, I'm actually going to show you what's been marked as.
All right. So there were parts of the testimony where the grandmother, I think she just had notes. And because testifying in court can be difficult. And I think she had specific quotes that she wanted to say and specific things that she wanted to say. And you could tell in the testimony that there was a history of conflict between the mother and the grandmother. And someone mentioned in the comments, could the mom have had some personality disorder features? And to me, even if mom did have a personality disorder, Colin needed to learn to manage the emotions, um, to not unalive someone, and so that's where my idea here was to talk about the traits of psychopathy and how sometimes um, if kids are having difficulty showing signs of empathy, what are some ways? Because sometimes what happens is people try to discipline those kids more and be harder and stricter on those kids. And sometimes what you need to do is you need to form a relationship. You need to assess, are there some signs of low self-esteem that's coming off as a like inflated self-esteem? Like sometimes we have to dig a little deeper to see what's going on. Is there a history of trauma? So if his dad really did chase him with a knife or something, and I don't know if all of that part of the story was true. I don't know. Only him and his dad were there, and I think, correct me in the chat if I'm wrong, I believe the jury is not aware of what happened to the father. I think there was, I think there was I love this comment. I'm gonna try to stay focused. I think there was I think the defense probably actively worked to get that part thrown out because it could be prejudicial to a jury. The fact that he also claimed self defense in the death of his father. The jury is aware that there was high tension, that he was a high risk to harm others. Um, and yeah, I was just, if by some chance he was found not guilty, I hope that they would strongly consider inpatient care to make sure that those underlying things are addressed because in my personal thoughts, I don't know him personally, so I can't, in a case like this, I would be concerned, would he do something like this again when he's mad? If there was the opportunity to do something like this again, would he do it? Yes, perfect. Okay, so the jury knows he unalived someone, they don't know who. Okay, good to know. And so, like I said, things have been ridiculous at work, and so I haven't been able to read everything. I am going to take another course with Dr. Romani this year. Next month, I have a training coming up with her. I think I might get to attend two of her sessions. And so, if I have any new resources or any new tools, I will definitely share that. And she has a YouTube channel, and she has a good video. Um, on if parents are concerned about narcissistic or psychopathic type traits in teens. Now, it's normal for teens to be egocentric, for teens to be focused on what they want, to struggle to see the perspective of their parents. To me, this situation went outside of what is normal. And with his mother's case, I wouldn't be surprised if Oklahoma took a look at their case again, especially if he is found not guilty. If there was any evidence that would be helpful in their case. Yes, yes. So I will. And I don't think she's gonna do any book signings. I'll have to make sure to take her book just in case, because I will try to get a signature and a picture with her if I can. I was able to get a picture with, Nedra Tawwab. Um, she does the Boundaries book that I love. I took a picture of Dr. Ramani last year, but I didn't get one with her. All right. Let me see if there was any other details from that. And then I did add a link to a site that talks about psychopathy. Now, some of these articles and things, sometimes they are trying to sell something. I am not endorsing anything that anybody is trying to sell. I'm just sharing this for information only. All right. So, disorders of aggression are treatable, and often it's a multi-dimensional that involves the family, the school, peers, and the community, and it might also involve medication. And so, treatment options for teenagers, family focused therapies. One of them is called MST, multi systemic family therapy, I think, or it's something like that, where it is a structured approach that tries to address family dynamics because sometimes the family doesn't manage anger well. Sometimes the family is difficult. They don't, it's high conflict in the family. Maybe there's some antagonistic behavior, like because sometimes it's not just the kid, sometimes it is the system. And so taking a systemic approach can often be helpful. My issue sometimes with residential treatment, but if we've gotten to the point where someone has died, that is where I'm gonna be more on alert if they're now saying that they're having homicidal thoughts towards somebody else. And so residential treatment is, care at a facility. The downside to residential treatment is that you're removed from the family, from your school, from your community. And so there always has to be a plan to transition the person back home, because if they go right back to that same system, to those same problems, even though the child might have received treatment, if the family is still the same, a lot of those behaviors will just come back. Or there's a higher probability that there will be problems down the road. And there is no medication for like to prevent aggression, but if the child has undiagnosed ADHD, sometimes medication can help with managing impulsivity. Or if somebody has untreated bipolar disorder or depression or anxiety, sometimes treating the underlying, if there's something else going on, treating those things. Um, and then with some individuals, they just had this increased agitation all the time. And so sometimes they were just placed on medication. Often there's one called 10X. There was one I've had clients on in the past that just kind of helped. It's actually a blood pressure medication, but they realized that it was helpful for aggression, based on some research, and things like that. All right. Let's see. All right. Barriers to treating children. There can often be stigma attached to a diagnosis for both the child and the family. Sometimes families can be concerned about being blamed for the child's behavior. There's a myth that these types of conditions don't respond to treatment, but that's not. So sometimes it's harder to get some insurance companies to pay for treatment for conditions like conduct disorder and oppositional defiant disorder. And then sometimes some families can lack the resources. And then sometimes there are limited available services through the juvenile justice or child welfare system. All right. And then there can be barriers to treating adults. All right. So that resource is down in the description. Let's see. Do you know if anyone is doing research into individuals with psychopathic traits being misdiagnosed with other mental health issues like autism? So let me see autism and um, psychopathy. Because to my knowledge, there is no link between those. Um, all right. Because within clinical psychology, we diagnose it as antisocial personality disorder. In children, it would get diagnosed um, as my brain, as conduct disorder. All right. Doo, doo, doo. So I found a study, and we have to remember that autism is a spectrum, and um, yes, because there are individuals with autism that are incredibly caring and that are, um, while the individual might have difficulty seeing things from somebody else's perspective, they're not trying to hurt other people, or they understand that hurting somebody else is wrong. And so, I also want to say, like, autism doesn't cause racism or doesn't cause those isms or obias. I think that's important to note. Um, Yes. All right. So let me share this tab. Uh-oh. Let me make myself a little smaller. All right. And I will share a link to this article. So this article is published in, looks like, let's see, Front Psychiatry. And this is from 20, oh wow, March of 2024. So this is a recent study. And the size of studies matters because just because there's a relationship or like one study can say one thing and another study can say something else. Most studies say that continued research is needed. But the results that they found is that sometimes some individuals with autism can have increased callousness or unemotional traits. But to me, um, because I work with individuals on the spectrum, I personally haven't seen um any issues like that. Yeah, no worries, no opinion is fine. All right. Yes, and so, often individuals with mental health conditions are more likely to harm themselves than others, and then also please also remember that individuals without diagnosis do crimes. So, like, crimes don't mean that there's a diagnosis, and that's why I have this channel and I talk about these things that, now, there are some diagnoses that are more likely to commit crimes, and that diagnosis tends to be antisocial personality disorder. And that condition can't be like, they're typically not given leniency by a court. Um, but that's the language that's given. So just because somebody does a crime does not necessarily mean that the mental health condition was behind it. I'm a big responsibility person and accountability. It's like, okay, yes, even if the individual, let's say Colin did have a diagnosis of bipolar disorder or something, and that the diagnosis sometimes it helps me understand why something happened, but it doesn't mean that there shouldn't be a punishment or a consequence or that the person should be less responsible. Now those things are left up to a jury, so I don't decide those things, but that's why I like to break stigma associated with this and then to give tools and resources so that if a child is being aggressive towards animals, if a child is um being if they have a lot of difficulty regulating their emotions, if a child is threatening to harm peers or threatening to harm others, those are red flags and people should seek out they should seek out effective treatment for that and that there are treatments for it because I think sometimes the mental health conditions can get a bad rap in the media or when things are talked about or covered because as I mentioned before, often individuals with those diagnoses are more likely to be victims of crimes do than to do crimes. There are some where it's like, yeah, sometimes um, common diagnoses in jails are ADHD, uh, um, the substance uh, the substance use disorders, sometimes schizophrenia because when somebody is in a psychotic state, um, yeah, so sometimes that particular diagnosis, and sometimes our mental health system can be so broken that people with mental health conditions end up falling into like the police jurisdiction instead of getting effective treatment. And so, do you think individuals with autism understand right from wrong? And so even somebody with antisocial personality disorder, so irrespective of an autism diagnosis, individuals with antisocial personality disorder often know right from wrong, but that does not change their behavior. So a characteristic of the disorder is disregarding the rules, the societal norms, disregarding those things and kind of putting their own needs above that. And so that's where sometimes antisocial personality and narcissism can sometimes go together, because there can be this inflated sense of self. There can be this, it's my way. Sometimes there can be those types of traits that go along. And that's sometimes when we talk about that dark triad. All right. Let me know if y'all have any other questions. Yes. That parents have to be proactive and they need to come in the room. And so that family therapy. If kids are having these types of issues and conditions, I've always so I worked at a mental health, an acute, so a short term psychiatric hospital for children here in Virginia. It's called Virginia Treatment Center for Children. I did my internship there and I was on the unit for 6 months. And while I was on the unit, I was really wishing that we could hospitalize families, like that the whole family could come in and be assessed, get treatment. That would be way too expensive. Insurance would never ever pay for it. But I feel like that would be more effective than just dropping off a 7-year-old and then the parents going home. Thankfully, our unit, a parent could stay, and this was back in 2008 to 2009. A parent could stay on the unit with children. I don't know if they've changed or updated their policies since then. Um, and we did do family therapy. That was something that we would offer. That is something that we would try to do. And prior to discharge, we would help the family find resources and supports that they could follow up on recommendations and hopefully avoid future hospitalizations. But yeah, it's all like in an ideal world, I would think if a child is in crisis, this is a family in crisis, and let's take a look at the whole system. Now, logistically, because parents have to work and I don't know. So logistically that might not work, but I just think that would be helpful. Yes. So I love creating a safe space for us to chat and talk about these things. And once again, answer y'all's questions, break stigma because it can be hard out there. Um, Okay. And then, hey, I see your comment that a family member is showing signs of either antisocial or histrionic personality disorder. And if the person is open to help, if the person is open to receive, because often histrionic disorder, the person is often crying out for help and often wants help, and finding the right treatment or the right supports can be helpful. Uh, aw, blessed. I see that your son still holds your hand when you go out. I love that. My son is 7 now, and he's now at a point where when I say goodbye to him at school, he no longer wants like a hug and a kiss on his head anymore. And so it's but and so I know by middle school, he's just gonna like want me to drop him off at the corner or something. Like he's gonna want nothing to do with me. And then once he's 18, he's gonna want free toilet paper and paper towels or something. I don't know. He's gonna want us to take him to the grocery store or something. I don't know. But um uh this is a really sad case. I Let's go to the poll. Let me see what's happening with the poll. Um I need to go into YouTube. Give me a moment. Do, do, do. Thank y'all for being here. Um, I res- Next week, next Tuesday, I have a friend. Um, she wrote a book. Let me share her book. It's called Elephant in the Room. Birds and the Bees, I believe is what it's called. Yes. Birds and the Bees and the Elephant in the Room. Talking, and it's a book about talking to kids about sex and other sensitive topics. It includes pornography and things like that. There have been some stories I've seen about kids being exploited. Um, And so this is her book, Rachel. She is going to join me, hopefully, as long as we don't have any scheduling issues. But this is her book. We are going to talk, and I'll probably do a community tab post on, I'll probably do a community post on, I always see y'all do amazing things in the chat on Sunday to get any questions y'all have for her. So anyone that can't be live with us on next Tuesday, that y'all can ask your questions in advance. And I'm gonna have a conversation with her. We met on TikTok. She is, I forget her handle. Might be like lacks impulse control or something. I'll have to think about what her TikTok handle is. I'll make sure to have links to all of her social media and a direct link to the book for next week. But we are going to have that chat next week. Yes, my kiddo is growing up way, way, way too fast. Um, your heart broke for a minute at that. Like he doesn't want to hug anymore. He just like runs off and into the building. It's like, oh, bye. And so, yes, and so it's a book for parents to, because it's written for parents to explain it to children. I think I have a copy right over here. Um, if I don't, I know I have it at my office. If I don't have it here, so I'll make sure to have my physical copy next week. But it is a book for parents to explain how to break things down, especially for different age ranges. I think that's how she grew. She has a whole bunch of followers over on TikTok, and I think she's probably on Instagram too. And she started by having conversations with her children. And she has children of different ages. So, how she talks with her 17-year-old is different than how she talks with her 5-year-old. And I'm picking those ages off the top of my head. And so, we're going to have that conversation next week, especially as we talk about, because we cover a lot of cases of grooming and kids um, not because often when kids have language about their appropriate body parts, about what's okay and not, and what is not okay, conversations around consent and boundaries. I've had clients that in middle school, when they go through talking about a healthy versus unhealthy relationships, sometimes they'll come into session like, oh, wow, I didn't realize that this past relationship was, unhealthy, or sometimes it can bring stuff up. So knowledge can be really powerful. And she breaks it down based on the kid's age, maturity, those different things. And so I'm excited to have her on next week. On Saturday, I will be with you all again. Um, not exactly sure what we're going to cover Saturday. I'm keeping an eye on a few different cases. If y'all have a case that I would like for me to cover, please put it in the regular comment section, and I will take a look at it. We're going to head out a little early today. I hope y'all have a good one. Bye.